I like to think Frank Moscow started almost at the start of tech in Silicon Valley.
The nice way of saying it is I was close to the birth of the beginning of technology. The other way of saying it is that I can say with certainty that dinosaurs taste like chicken. Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel Technology, coined Moore's Law, which is essentially was the semiconductor processor was going to double in horsepower and the price was going to be cut in half every 18 months. The only reason that this phone has more compute power than what it did for America to send the first people to the moon is because Moore's Law was right. The rate of change has never accelerated at the pace it is accelerating now. Humans have no experience for this. We have no idea about how to manage this rate of change as a species. And to me, that is both the opportunity and the threat defined.
Is there a perspective you could share on how you think it might be beneficial for people to view the future? My discussion with Frank Moscow is, I won't call it rare, but it's a beautiful conversation with somebody who was there at pretty much the beginning of Silicon Valley, when you used to program computers with punch cards. He's now on the board of a venture capital company 4 decades odd later. If you're interested in the view of how the future might look, if you're a person who's starting up a tech company or you have a tech company and you want to hear some sage advice from somebody on a board of a VC company, you should listen to this. I actually think this is for everyone. It's darn interesting, and we're all involved in the future. It's our future. What could it look like? Well, here's somebody with a bucket load of experience from that world who created all of this, and he's got some thoughts. Come and have a listen. But you did start virtually, it's a line in the sand, isn't it? I like to think Frank Moscow started almost at the start of tech in Silicon Valley.
I mean, there is certainly not at the start, but certainly very, very early on. When you think about where technology is, punch cards and referencing learning software or development on punch cards certainly makes me really, really old. The nice way of saying it is I was close to the birth of the beginning of technology. The other way of saying it is that I can say with certainty that dinosaurs taste like chicken. So it depends upon how you look at it, but yeah, punch cards were a long time ago.
Indeed. And you were telling me a story, Frank, about how you left university to do this, which is a great insight, because a lot of people these days would think about, computer science or programming, I'll go to university. They didn't even teach it back then.
They didn't know what to do with it. And most computer science degrees didn't even start until well after I was in school. So in 1979, when I went to college, there was punch cards. And for the people in your audience that aren't familiar with them, they're like a little bit larger. They're like 4x6 cards. And you use a typewriter to punch holes in the punch cards that corresponded to machine instruction language. It was originally started as BASIC, then the languages were Fortran and COBOL, and those were essentially machine software to control what the hardware did. The whole notion of software really didn't come into play for another decade or two.
Yeah, that's quite extraordinary, isn't it?
Well, I mean, if you think about it, National Semiconductor, one of the first semiconductor companies, started in 1959.
Wow. Really?
Um, MS-DOS, the version 1.0, Microsoft Disk Operating System. That's what DOS stands for. Disk meaning hardware, Disk Operating System. The first version of that didn't come out until 1981. So when you think about what happened, it was called Silicon Valley. It wasn't called Software Valley. It wasn't called Internet Valley. It was called Silicon Valley because everything was based upon semiconductors and hardware systems. And the only software that really existed was what we called firmware, which was essentially um, the first version of software that only controlled the instructions for the machine itself.
Yeah.
So
It's
yeah, we've come a long way.
it's a you guys would have been considered on the fringe back in the day. What stands out in your mind in terms of a story you could share with us about people generally thinking you guys were crazy, you were wasting your time, putting your effort and probably your money into things that they didn't understand?
Well, and I mean, you never really know how this is going to play out. When IBM first decided that they were going to do a PC, a personal computer, they really didn't know. Nobody really knew where this was going to lead. And a perfect story is that when you go back and you take a look at the archives, one of the things that they were thinking about as an application for PCs is for, at the time, housewives to use that to store their recipes. I mean, they really didn't know where it was going to go. Nobody knew where it was going to go. Um, Uh, and software was viewed as an afterthought. Software was viewed as the ugly cousin in high technology. Um,
Why
uh,
is that?
to,
Why is that?
because everything was hardware oriented, and everything really started with the semiconductor and with the big mainframes. Um, and the PCs at the time were very, very clunky. There was no memory. There was really no compute horsepower. It was, they were very limited in what they could actually do. Um, one of the interesting stories is that there's a woman by the name of Anne Winblad, and she got famous for two things. One is that she was a female software entrepreneur that sold her first accounting software business for something like 15 million back in the 1980s, which at the time was an extraordinary amount of money and an extraordinary outcome for a software company. The other two reasons why she became famous is because at the time she was the girlfriend of Bill Gates. Um,
Hmm.
and she started, I believe it was in the 1980s, the first venture capital firm only dedicated to software. And she was called all sorts of crazy words because nobody thought that there was any market or opportunity for software venture capital.
Yeah. Little did they know.
Exactly. So, part of this is you never really know how the story plays out. And even the most astute observers or prognosticators still got an insane amount wrong.
Which is probably what we still do today because we're still human beings.
Sure. I mean, if you take a look at the internet on the dot-com bubble, um, you know, that was that was wild speculation. It was the tulip markets back in Europe a couple hundred years
Hmm.
ago. Um, People understood that the internet was going to change the world, but how it was going to change the world and how people were going to use the internet is either productivity tool or an entertainment tool. Nobody really had a clue.
So, what did you anchor yourself around Frank, because I can imagine when you were out of college, it was a risk to take to do what you were going to do. And I can imagine there would have been people around you saying, Frank, what are you doing with your life?
Absolutely. Until I started making more money than they were, then things shifted around a little bit, right?
Did that take did that take very long to do or to take place?
It did not take long to do, only because there were anytime there's a nascent industry, um, if you have 3 years of experience in an industry that is 5 years old, you're an expert. Whether you are or not, it doesn't matter. They can't ask for somebody with 10 years of experience to do a job because nobody on the planet has 10 years of experience. So there is an inherent advantage for somebody who is young to get involved in an industry that is very early in its evolution, because you end up with opportunities that you would never have in a more mature industry or environment. And I enjoyed the opportunity to be an expert even when I wasn't.
Well, technically you were.
Well, I mean, if on a scale of 1 to 10, 2 or 3 and nobody else knows 1.5, then, you're an expert. But you still, you take a look around and you're going, yeah, we're all making this up as we go along, which is essentially what happened for the first, couple dozen years, couple of decades in technology. Everybody was just making it up.
At what points did you see the convergences where there was a whole bunch of activity, probably fragmented because nobody knew where it would go, and then you see convergence points where things come together and you go, there's one thing. It might take off in that direction or it might take off in that direction?
I think that there were a couple of things. First of all, is what doesn't get a lot of play is the underpinning technology that makes everything that we do possible. Um, Gordon Moore, the co-founder of Intel Technology, coined Moore's Law, which is essentially was the semiconductor processor was going to double in horsepower and the price was going to be cut in half every 18 months. And when he said that, people thought that he was just crazy, because you extrapolate that out over a decade or 2 decades or 3 decades, and nobody could envision that level of technology. And what happened is that he was right, and it did happen. And the only reason that we're able to do what we are doing right now, the only reason that people are able to play the games that they're able to do, the only reason that we're able to do any of these applications that we enjoy as part of our technology lives, the only reason that this phone has more compute power than what it did for America to send the first people to the moon is because Moore's Law was right. And that underpins everything that we do in technology, is that the device technology, what you were able to do in terms of processing speed, and sheer compute power, is beyond what anybody realistically imagined. So that's kind of the first thing. And then the second thing that's been really interesting is the different business models. When you think of software, software used to be you buy software and you pay $1,000 for the software, and then you pay let's say $100 to $150 a year for the maintenance of that software or support. Software as a service is now a model where you don't pay a lot up front, but you pay on a regular basis. That is new. All of the so you've had this really interesting combination of both technological advances that are extraordinary, along with business advances and business models that have changed to take advantage of the increase in capability that exists on our phones and in our laptops.
Yeah, the change is extraordinary, really, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, you take a look at what's going on in AI right now, and I remember having conversations with people about AI 40 years ago, and what we were talking about AI and what AI was for a long period of time was the best technology of the future that never quite gets there. Uh, and now, finally, after 30, 35 years of people talking about AI, it's finally here. But the only reason it's here is because, when you think about large language models and the compute power and technology that needs to take place, there was no way that the neural networks of 10, 15 years ago were going to get anywhere near what we're able to do today.
Are you surprised, Frank, at where we are today?
Um, I am. I mean, that's part of the fun, right? Is I'm always surprised. There's always a level of wow, I didn't think about that, or I didn't know if we were ever going to get there. And AI is a perfect example. Um, Artificial intelligence within the technology world has been around for, God, I don't know, 3, 4 decades, something like that. Um, it was called neural networking. It was called a lot of different things. Um, but it couldn't do the most basic of basic functions to show actual intelligence. Um, and the the level of chip technology that enables this to occur today is beyond what I could have ever realistically expected.
Mm, mm.
I don't know. I don't know. I sent you the article on how ASML's leading edge lithography tool works. You may want to post that somewhere. But I mean, when you read that, doesn't it to you sound more like science fiction?
Yeah, it does. But that's old, isn't it? That technology.
But I mean, to me, that explanation of how that machine works, I think there's two in the world. One is at TSMC um, in Taiwan, and one is at Intel in Oregon. It takes up a small room. It's $350 million per machine. Um, and when you read about how it actually works at the atomic level to create a device, is just extraordinary.
Mm.
And it truly is science fiction to even the people who are deep in science.
Yeah, that's a good idea. I will post that. Thanks for sharing.
Yeah.
I want to get your view on looking back, because we have a tendency to talk about the really good, exciting stuff that happened, but it's a very big picture. And oftentimes, as something develops or an industry develops with hundreds of thousands of people and billions of dollars, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't work. There's a lot of stuff that goes wrong. There are train wrecks.
All the time.
Yeah. What are the things that stand out in your mind in that journey that you look and go, yeah, that wasn't really good?
I think that there's always this tendency to, we call it crossing the chasm or the valley of death, um, in the venture capital world, where there's this initial excitement and everybody gets on board and it's really, really cool. And venture capital throws just a ton of money into it. And then the reality hits, which is, where are the customers? How much are they willing to pay for this? Um, Gee, all the assumptions we made aren't turning out to be true. The customers don't value this as much as we thought. We had some inherent miscalculations about what the end market might actually be. And so what's interesting to me is that um, even though the technologies change and the applications evolve, there are still some basics that seem to always occur. One is there's always this boom and bust. There's always this frothy excitement, and then all too many companies get funded. There's too much money chasing ideas. Um, a few of them go on to be wildly successful. Most fail and lose all of their investors' money. Um, and that is a pattern that's repeated itself in the venture capital community since the dawn of venture capital, and it is continuing today. And AI will certainly play out in that way. I may not be able to tell you who all the winners are. I can with certainty say that 90% of the money that's going into AI right now, in terms of new companies, is dead money.
But that's not different to how it's always been.
Exactly. That is the one part of the story that remains consistent, decade to decade, technology to technology.
I call it the price of creativity.
Exactly. It's exactly it. And when you take a look at what happened in the dot-com phase, what you ended up with is, way too many companies getting funding at obscene valuations, and then reality hit, and the valuations just cratered, and hardly anybody could get funding. 90% ish of the companies that were started in the dot-com area were gone, and there was a few of them that had actually pretty interesting ideas that just bumped along the bottom. Took it down to maybe a few handful of employees, maybe 5, maybe 50, depending upon what their business model was. You didn't hear about them for a year, for 2 years, for 5 years. And then all of a sudden, they went like this. And that's a relatively common occurrence, is that you end up with this cycle of euphoria, then despair, and then there's a few companies that are fighting through that despair and find a way to be successful.
So you're on the board of a VC company, and I was curious to know if I was a young, oh, I don't have to be young, but generally I think they're young, company who's looking for funding, what would you say to them that perhaps you would advise differently today than you might have 5 years ago? Because 5 years is a long time in tech.
It is. So the challenge with AI is that if you are doing something in software, if AI can now write code, everybody else can do what you're trying to do in a matter of an hour, a day, 2 days. So then the question becomes, what is your differentiator and what is your protectable advantage? And as time goes on, unless you really have deep, deep technology or an extraordinary understanding of an end market, it's becoming harder to really have something that is protectable now and that you can envision having a protectable moat around for 2, 3, 5 years. And so what I encourage entrepreneurs to do is to think about the fact that the ability to have some type of unique or protectable intellectual property in the technology sector is getting harder and harder to do. So what is your secret sauce? What can you do that nobody else can do that will enable your success? Because it used to be, I can write this code and I can get a technology patent for it. Well, that's kind of an old mentality now. There needs to be something else that you bring to the table that is sustainable, that will create value. And that is really getting hard to define.
I bet. Are you seeing many companies come to you guys for funding that fit that box, that you can say, actually, you have found something?
So we're a small VC fund, so we typically fund 3 to 5 new companies a year, and we typically do follow-on investment for another 3 to 5 companies per year. So that's our normal kind of pace and cadence in that. And what we are finding is that there really has to be this insane scenario of you understand a market as well as anybody in the world, and you have the connections to back that up, or you have to have customer data that nobody else is going to be able to get, because part of the AI is leveraging the data that's already there. So if they had an exclusive relationship with a Fortune 2000 company where they had all of their end user data that they were going to train their LLM models on and be able to have a data set and a perspective that nobody else had, okay, that's interesting. What we're also finding is that we tend to also take a look at what's getting ignored. Everybody is focused on AI to the point where there's, if everybody else is looking right, I'm wanting to go look left and see, okay, what's over here that's being ignored? And what's interesting is what is being underfunded right now. And what's being underfunded is things that actually have a physical product. Because everybody is so focused on AI and something that relates to AI, that if you have something that actually involves a product, something that's physical, that you can hold, feel, touch, whatever's, those things, even if they have an AI component to them, but they actually require human beings and a physical something. Those areas are, interestingly enough, getting underfunded because everybody is so enamored with removing the human from the equation and making it all AI. And so what I'm really interested in is what are the areas that are being underfunded or not getting very much TLC in because everybody else is over here. And in that case, there's two things going on. There's opportunity, and B, there's much from a venture capital funder standpoint, there's much better valuations.
Yeah, that makes good sense.
Yeah, I mean, the valuations between AI over here, which is a wing and a prayer right now for a lot of the early stage companies, and these other companies over here that might actually have a real business and could be AI enhanced or SaaS enhanced, but still involve something physical. The dichotomy between those valuations is crazy, and the delta is extraordinary. So anytime there's that huge delta, I'm taking a look and going, all right, well, maybe over here might be a little more interesting right now.
Yeah, it makes good sense. I want to get your view on a conversation I had with somebody the other day. And I think you're right. Everybody is almost hyper-focused on AI.
Mm-hmm.
And the sentiment that I gleaned from that conversation is that they were losing hope about their potential to start up a new company or find something that was more unique. And I was more in your camp, thinking, well, certainly for the short-term future, I can't see taking humans out of the loop. And humans will, I think, migrate to having some sort of connection, something physical, something made by a human. Like, to me, that makes sense. It's just an opinion. How do you see that? And do you see hope in the future with robotics and AI involved? Because they're not going away.
They're not going away. And, the applications and what happens, I don't know that I'm going to be any better prognosticating than anybody else is out there. But you can take a look at anything and say, wow, this is amazing. AI drug discovery, as an example, what they're able to do in terms of, a couple of companies I'm aware of, they're able to test 1 million different biologics a month through AI to target various diseases. What used to take, decades in a lab can be done in a couple of weeks now via using AI drug discovery technologies. What that means for humankind is actually, you play it out over the next few years, could actually be pretty incredible. So
Yeah.
you can take a look at some things and go, wow, this is pretty amazing. Um, on the negative side, one of the people that I serve on the board with of the Oregon Venture Fund is a woman who runs a multi-hundred person customer service operation for a very, very large operation. And we have these interesting conversations about how so many companies are outsourcing their customer service to AI chatbots and all of the things that we've experienced. And my experience with those, and I think a lot of your viewers' experience with those, are pretty negative.
Yep.
And in some cases infuriating. Um, Um, and the bottom line is that they may be artificial, but they don't seem all that intelligent. And I certainly can't get my questions answered when I interact with one of these things. Um, and so I asked her, so help me understand what's going on. And there's a couple of things that are happening. Is the one was this huge rush to do this. And companies and the CEOs and the CFOs were salivating over how much money they could save and how much they could increase the earnings per share by removing all of these costs and inserting AI. And now what you are seeing is people putting a brakes on it and going, whoa, we need to rethink this because the customer feedback has been awful and people aren't happy. So what I expect is going to happen is that if you're dealing with, let's say, an airline, that if you are buying a coach ticket, you are going to be stuck with AI, unless you're a member of their frequent flyer program and have a certain status. But there is going to be tiered levels of services where you're going to be able to interact with a human being if you spend a lot of money with them. And you are probably going to be stuck with AI if you're not. And for the people that are doing that, that is going to be challenging. And that is the real world day-to-day part where we live. So you can talk about the grand picture, but I like to focus on what is the customer experience. And the customer experience often gets lost in the conversation until it has a huge impact in the P&L.
Yep. Yep. I've seen adoption being not that easy as well. There's a lot of talk about incorporating AI into operations. And I think I love it as a great tool. I use it, all my staff use it. But integrating it into a business operation isn't that straightforward. And there are so many tools, and every tool has its, like a human being really, has its strengths, has its weaknesses.
Well, I mean, in this case, AI is just like any other software. Garbage in, garbage out. I mean, and that is the one thing that is true of all software, whether you're talking about from the very beginning to now, AI. No amount of AI can fix the input that is getting from the systems that already exist. So that's really what you're talking about, is the integration. Everybody thinks that you can just push a button and AI is going to solve everything. No, it's not. It is going to take the information that it is being fed. But if the information that it is being fed um, within these companies that are 10, 20 years old, and a lot of those systems haven't been updated, haven't been maintained, are not current, then you've got garbage in, garbage out, and the AI is going to fail and fail miserably. And that's what a lot of the companies are learning right now is that they have totally screwed up the integration because they underappreciated and underestimated the amount of delayed maintenance that they have in the existing systems that the AI is pulling information from.
Brings that problem to light, doesn't it?
It really does, because the people, if you have a non-technology CEO and a non-technology CFO who are running a consumer or an airline or a food company or something like that, um, there may be a lack of appreciation for um, the level of legacy systems that are in place that have accumulated over decades, and getting the data out and then getting the data washed and getting that accurate so that the AI system can actually do what it is supposed to do. And that's why you see companies putting the brakes on it. That's why you see it not yet being the panacea for fabulous earnings per share impact for a lot of these companies, because they've totally underestimated how difficult uh, using all of that legacy data within the new AI is going to be.
Do you think it might take another 5 years for them to learn their lesson, reorganize, reclassify their data, clean it?
It depends upon how technology, the strength of the technology within those existing companies. But there's a lot of household name companies that have a lot of legacy systems, and if you take a look at where they've put their money in to technology, they have been scared to death of being hacked. They have been scared to death of security, of being of somehow being violated. Okay, which makes perfect sense. But at the same time, they've invested in making sure that they're not hacked in some way. What they haven't invested in as much is um, taking all of this old data and old infrastructure and making sure that as you migrate it forward, it's still going to be real and accurate.
Yeah, and that's not as easy as it sounds, is it? We've done that in our company in the last acquisition, and we are still cleaning data 3 years later.
Yeah. And it is the absolutely unsexy part of the business. Nobody, nobody gets on the cover of a magazine for doing that, right? Nobody becomes a billionaire. It's just one of these things where it's like, it is the plumbing of high technology. And, if you ask, where should somebody go? I would say, well, if you don't need to be sexy and you just want to make a lot of money, go into the plumbing of high technology, because that's where it may not be sexy, it may not be glamorous, but it's hard work and it's darn lucrative.
Yeah, data plumbing. I like it. I might set that as a personal goal, just as an aside, Frank, now that you bring it up. I would love to be on the cover of a magazine for data cleaning. And I know I won't be a billionaire, but
so one of my favorite investments in one of my favorite companies is, and I'll use this as an example because Up until recently, nobody really knew who they were. Have you ever heard of a company called Cloudflare?
Yes.
Okay, you know about Cloudflare.
No, I don't know about them. I've just heard of them.
Okay, so Cloudflare, if you Google them, I think you will find that about 20, somewhere around 20% of the internet traffic in the world goes through Cloudflare.
Wow.
Yeah, of the
That's a lot of
world.
traffic. Wow.
That is a lot of traffic. Okay. Um, and their basic premise was a long time ago when they were founded was really simple. I mean, their tagline is build a better internet. But what they basically said was, we are not hip enough to understand what is going to happen next. Don't have a clue. We don't know what applications are going to win. We don't know what 16-year-old girls are going to want to do on their phones. We don't know any of that at all, and we never will. The only thing we are going to bet the farm on is that there is this thing called the internet, and we're going to require more and more and more of this pipe on a yearly basis than we've ever had before. And we need to optimize that pipe for speed and for security. And we are going to focus totally on the internet plumbing. And that's what they did. And up until recently, nobody really knew who they were. And they are one of the most successful companies out there right now that very few people have ever really heard of.
So why are we hearing about them now? Like, I do know the name, but I don't know what they do. But I do know the name.
If you ever want to listen to one of the most amazing analyst calls of a public company, I would encourage you to listen to Cloudflare's analyst calls on a quarterly basis. It is the best earnings call that I've ever heard. Because of the depth of honesty and clarity that you get. And then because they handle 20% of the web traffic, they also have insights into what's going on around the world and on usage that very few other organizations have. So it's actually very interesting. But what they've done is they've been able to essentially land and expand, where they make the pipe better, they make the pipe safer, and now they've been able to add business tools on top of that so that people that are interacting with AI and using the pipe in different ways have tools that they can use to make their experience easier, safer, and faster. But when you think about what they did is, everybody knows the Magnificent Seven, but there is a lot of other stuff going on within the infrastructure space that really makes this all happen. And I think that people who can, solve the hard plumbing problems, or the integration issues that you and I have just been talking about, that's hard work, and that's where a lot of money is.
Yeah, I used to be in the infrastructure game, and the way I'm looking at things now is we have several blockages, and the infrastructure, it's not an obstruction, but it's going to slow us down a bit because it takes a lot of time to build these things out.
It takes a lot of time and a lot of expertise. And when you have these massive denial of service campaigns that are being waged by black hat nation states or whoever's, the ability to mitigate against some of these problems and keep the internet up and running. Yeah, It's an interesting it's an interesting place to be, but going back to what you said, on a company by company basis, if you're looking at integrating any new tool, the new tool, whether it's AI or anything else, is only as good as the data that you put into it as you ramp up, as you implement. And that's tripping up a lot of people right now.
That's a great reminder, Frank. One of the things I love about interviewing and talking to people on podcasts is sometimes, and many times, things fall out of the conversation that are unexpected, but so relevant. You could apply that to anything.
I mean, it's delayed maintenance, whether it's a house or a car or really anything. It really is just delayed maintenance, but we have delayed maintenance on our data. And AI isn't going to fix all of that.
Ah. Frank, using your imagination, what do you reckon the world will look like in 15 to 20 years?
I think that one of the things that we're already seeing is that the ability for the on-demand economy to completely change the rules. And I think that that is going to continue to accelerate.
What do you mean by that, Frank?
Well, for example, you think about the level of autonomous driving as an example. Um, um, we have people who own cars. How many hours a day do we drive our car?
Maybe 2?
Maybe 2. And do we do it 7 days a week?
Probably.
Okay. So therefore, in 168 hours a week, your asset is providing some functionality 14 of those 168 hours. Okay, if you were to take a look at it in an on-demand world, you'd say that is a highly underutilized asset. It's only on 8% of the time, and the other time it is just depreciating. That world goes away. And any other asset that doesn't provide either economic value or utility value is going to be in an on-demand space. So, I mean, I think that's going to be pretty straightforward. So you think about how that kind of reorders life. Well, what happens if there's no reason for you to own a car? What happens if the on-demand is so easy that it is much, much cheaper for you to just do an Uber-like scenario, and it's cheaper because there's no driver involved, and because that asset can be used 23 hours a day, every day. It goes back for an hour of docking and to charge up and cleaning, and then it goes back out again. And the economic models of what we all do every day completely changes. And then what does that do to cities? And what does that do to, how we run our governments when we're used to getting gasoline taxes and now everything doesn't run on gas anymore? And what does that do to places like parking garages and stuff like that? So I'm using that as an example, but I think that everything that doesn't provide either economic or utility value on a fairly consistent basis is going to be in an on-demand world.
Yeah, that's actually an interesting example, because if you extrapolate the number of vehicles you only need 14% of the vehicles. If that average was true, I don't know if it is, but just as an example,
right. So, I mean, I think we're just moving to a very clear on-demand world where there will be some things that, because it provides because either you just want it or because it provides utility value to you, not necessarily economic value to you, you will have it. Otherwise, everything else is going to be out there or out in the cloud or whatever's. Um,
Where do you see the space for robots and robotics in 20 years, Frank?
I think that, based upon what we're seeing, I like Steve Wozniak, I think, came up with the perfect definition of when a robot will be truly AI. And I think he said that when a robot can come into your house and make you a cup of coffee, that's when. I don't know when it's going to happen. If I had to put money on it, I'd say somewhere in the 5 to 10 year range. But if a robot can do that, what else can the robot do? And wow.
Yeah.
The other thing that is really interesting is that I am the last generation of leaders and managers that have managed a human-only workforce.
Mm.
We're actually funding a company that, and this is hard to wrap my brain around right now, but we're actually funding a company that is able to prove that it is working for you and not somebody that's not you. So that if you have 10 AI agentic engines or whatever you want to call them, how do we prove that they are actually working for you and legitimate versus not working for you and illegitimate with regards to the ability to access data and different levels of security depending upon what you want that agentic engine or entity to do for you? I.e., what we are doing is we are trying to prove humanity to a computer. And the humanity that we're trying to prove to a computer is, in fact, another computer.
But it's real.
I have a hard time wrapping my brain around that one. Okay, well, but if you are in your 20s, 30s, and 40s, and you manage something, you are going to be managing non-human workforce.
Yes.
That's never happened in the course of human history like this. Where that leads, and could you have, what happens if you and everybody else has 1,000 different agentic engines working for you and doing stuff for you? And what happens from that? I don't know. It's going to be crazy. So part of it is part of it is kind of the brain, which is the agentic engines doing work for you that is non-physical, that is all data, bits and bytes. And part of it, the other part of it is the robotic part, i.e., there has to be a physical presence because they're actually doing something for you that requires a physical presence. How that's going to play out, that's going to be fascinating.
It's a world I really do love. There's a host of people. There's so many different opinions on it, and a lot of fear at the same time. There are a lot of people who go, "Yeah." So tell me about the should be. What's your opinion on that? It's interesting you say there should be.
Because the one truth is that when you get beyond something like a world war or something like that, when you get beyond these kind of existential threats, but I'm talking about across all of humanity, the rate of change has never accelerated at the pace it is accelerating now. And the rate of change is going to accelerate even faster. Humans have no experience for this. We have no idea about how to manage this rate of change as a species. And to me, that is both the opportunity and the threat defined, is that if you take a look at the course of human history, we have never had the rate of change that we're having now, and it's only going to get faster, and that is going to cause lots of well-deserved fear. It's going to create massive winners and losers. And it is going to reorder society in ways that are probably known and unknown. And and as a species, it's going to be very interesting to see how we adapt to something that humans have never had to deal with.
So given, I'm excited about that, but not everybody is. Is there a perspective you could share on how you think it might be beneficial for people to view the future? Given that I think that's a fairly real and grounded analysis of what's going on.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is if you think about health and drug discovery and what might happen there, I can actually see that the lifespan and the quality of life going up significantly as a result of what is happening. We are going to learn more about our bodies and what goes on in our bodies and what creates sickness, and how to deal with things like cancer. And we are making just giant leaps forward in terms of being able to say that, maybe in 10, 15, 20 years, cancer will be just nothing more than a historical footnote. Okay. Wow. That would be pretty friggin' amazing.
Yep.
So, I think like anything that we've seen, there is going to be good and bad, and we're already seeing that. The difference is it will be magnified more than it ever has been in the past, and I think that that's true of both the good and the bad. Where the good will be amazingly good, and the bad will be really friggin' scary. And both can be true.
Yeah.
When you take a look at the internet, I think that most people would say that that in terms of the human condition, both the good and the bad of the internet have been fully realized. And if you want examples of good, there's plenty out there. And if you want to see examples of bad, awful, ugly, criminal, etc., there's plenty of examples out there. I would say the same thing about what's going to happen in the future, but I'd multiply it by 100.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
So I don't think that changes the human condition or the ability for people to use it for good or evil. I think that the only difference in this case is going to be the magnitude of it is going to be gigantic, and it is going to test humanity in terms of pace of change.
I do take heart, Frank, because my observations of human beings is we're incredibly adaptable, and more adaptable, I think, than perhaps what we give ourselves credit for.
Well, and the other thing is that there was a book written a long, long time ago, really almost at the very early stages of technology, called High Tech, High Touch. And it's insanely out of date now because it was written, I don't know, 3 decades ago. But the basic context, which I actually am wrapping my arms around right now, is that the more we become technology focused, the more we crave real world human interaction. And so the basic construct was the high tech, high touch was the higher the high tech goes, the more we want and crave human interaction and connection with another human being. And, and you think about some of the global epidemics, one of the biggest global epidemics right now is the loneliness of young men.
Yes.
And there's a lot of literature out about that. And what's going on is that a lot of young men are searching for community. They're searching for connection. And some are doing it in a positive way, and some are doing it in a negative way. And but I do believe that at its core, what we are doing is we are saying, as a global community, that the higher the high tech goes, the more we really want human to human interaction. Now, will robots change that? I.e., will a robotic friend, a robotic romantic partner change that? I think that will be also very interesting to see what happens. The global birth rate is going down. Many countries are not are their deaths exceed their births by a significant amount. Um, what happens when we crave this interaction between human beings, but we find more comfort and solace with an agentic being rather than another human?
Well, that's a fascinating topic all on its own, isn't it?
It really is, because I have friends who are um, psychologists and psychiatrists, and get together and talk with them. And what happens when you get actually pretty good AI advice, and you get a good listening ear, and an agentic something that is programmed to your likes and preferences, who doesn't push back, who doesn't have any of the annoying human qualities that we all have. um, and you find it easier to relate to them as your partner than you do another human being. And how does that play out in the next 10, 15, 20 years? It's all going to be interesting to observe.
Yeah. I think I can see it happening, and yeah, I can see the not so good side of that.
Absolutely.
What,
And so everything has its everything that has happened from the beginning of technology has been that the rate of pace has continued to speed up. And as a result of that speeding up, you've had the speeding up of the good and the speeding up of the bad. Just multiply that by 100 on both sides. And I think that's where we're heading. And I don't know how it plays out, but if you're asking me for my best guess, my best guess is, yeah, there will be um, an extraordinary example of amazingly good things that we never thought we'd see in our lifetime, and there will be some stuff that will be really ugly and awful as well.
all right. That's not that positive, but I'm going to end it there.
You take a look at everything that's going on the internet right now, and I don't know if you've ever spent any time on the dark web, but if you do so, make sure you've got really good computer security. Um, But the point is that um, the genie's out of the bottle,
Mm.
and there's no way to put the genie back in the bottle.
Yep.
So we just have to be prepared for the fact that um, it is going to be massive, and enjoy the ride.
Well, on that note, Frank, really, I do thank you for spending the time. It's great to have a conversation with somebody who's embedded in it and has been for a long time.
It's been fun. Thank you. I very much appreciate it. It's always interesting to see what happens when you sit down with fun people at a restaurant.
Indeed. Thanks, Frank.